So after having a very rough start in early access, Stormgate has been having some occasional updates and roadmaps being published, but perhaps none more telling about its future than the updates and roadmaps we've received in the last few days. There's essentially three elements to this: the recent update to the actual game, the planned roadmap, and a statement from game director Tim Campbell. Let's start with the last one of these three. So Tim Campbell did shed some light on the early access launch problems, and was clearly really just quite transparent on it. You can't really ask for much more. I won't quote the whole article, but only snippets of what the most important parts were, and a summarization of the others. He explained that we know, meaning Frostgiant Studios, that our early access launch did not meet your expectations or ours. We felt pressure to get the game into players' hands, but in doing so before the game could make a positive first impression was the wrong move. Key areas of the game needed significantly more time to develop, and we released it far too early. That mistake is on us, and we regret it. So having followed Stormgate for quite a long time now, I think this is the first real public expression of how Frostgiant have felt the early access launch has gone. And while interestingly enough, it is very, very transparent. They clearly highlight and recognize that it was a mistake, and I actually think that the statement really shows positivity for the future, because they're not in denial about the situation. I have to say, it did feel a little bit awkward at the time because it was an unusual mistake, I would say, because these developers, they are real veterans in the RTS genre. But ultimately, a mistake is a mistake. It happens and they're not intentional. The campaign was really quite lackluster, and I think for most people, we're not really surprised that they got a mixed review on Steam. However, one thing is highlighting a problem, the other thing is fixing it. And the team are planning to address the lessons learned by giving things more time to cook, and now keeping their top development priorities on the campaign and the 1v1 versus game modes, followed then immediately by the Team Mayhem 3v3 mode. I think this is a really good plan of action. He mentions that the other features like the map editor and expanded co-op content are still part of the longer term planning, but they won't be taking priority until they've gotten further along with the other key modes. For me, the most important part of this statement is that the development priority is on the campaign. It's been put to the top of the list, and I can't explain how glad I was to read that. It turns out if you look at pretty much any data of which game mode the RTS gamers like to play, the vast majority are campaign enjoyers. They form the vast majority of the active player base, and so prioritizing the largest chunk of your possible audience, in the way that they should, is the most obvious thing to do. Having said that, surprisingly, a lot of RTS games just haven't done that. It just seems a little bit crazy and a little bit unusual, and doesn't really make sense, so I'm glad to see that Frostgiant aren't falling into the same trap. And in fact, I can't even think of a single truly great or legendary RTS game that didn't all start off with an absolutely epic campaign. Speaking of money, there has been a lot of concern about the funding of Stormgate and whether Frostgiant Studios actually have enough cash to keep it going, and with this statement, people will breathe a sigh of relief. They've been able to share that Bitcraft, one of the investors who helped launch Frostgiant Studios, is leading an additional funding round to support the journey that will help them deliver a solid 1.0 release. Stormgate's 1.0 release is tentatively being aimed for the second half of next year, which means 2025. Now this statement I think will put a lot of people at ease actually as it happens, because you need money to make a good game, and hopefully Stormgate is looking to become a good game with the changes that are coming. So there is plenty more that I would like to discuss about these Stormgate updates, but before we do, I would like to say a very big thank you for everyone who's been supporting the channel. And if you haven't already, make sure that you've hit the subscribe button, more importantly, that you've hit the notification bell so they get a bit of a ding-dong when I do upload a new news-related video. As always, thanks for the support, but with that out of the way, let's talk more about the Stormgate. Another huge point of contention with Stormgate, which Frostgiant Studios are addressing head-on, is with regards to Stormgate's visual identity and art direction. Well, they've got a new art director, Alan Dilling, who is leading the way with fresh ideas to elevate the look and feel of the core factions. Units in particular, the Brute, Hedgehog, Fiend and Lancer, are getting updates to better contribute to strengthening faction identity and making the game more memorable and fun. They've even gone so far as to publish a sneak peek video of the new concept artwork, and they look actually really good, apart from maybe one of them, but we'll talk about that in just a moment. Taking a look at the Brute, I mean, this just looks so much better than what it is now. It's darker, more polished, and shows off more of a refined Infernals faction. Also, the armor does give it a really good sign that actually colors for different players will look really visible. A cool feature of the brute is that it can split into fiends, which now look even more dinosaur looking, more menacing, and more like an actual unit, an animal in its own right, as opposed to what it previously looked like, kind of a tadpole. The Gaunt is also getting updates, which looks more menacing and darker than the previous version. It certainly looks a lot more beefier, a little bit more substantial, and we'll see how that mixes in with the rest of the tier 1 units. Some new caster concepts were also shown off, one with multiple sets of arms that folds in, that looks really creepy by the way, with symbols and masks that enable some pretty cool lore building options, and another with a puzzle box feel as a caster. It's a type of unit that I didn't really expect to see in Stormgate, but to be honest, it's new, it's fresh, it's different, and it's kind of cool to see that in the Infernals faction. Some of the structures are being looked over, with new concept artwork being shown off, and considering the actual extent of what's being shown, it almost feels like there's going to be a totally different look to the Infernals. But of course, the Infernals are just one of 3 factions. Updates for the Vanguard might be planned too, with possible changes to the melee Lancer unit, and also the Hedgehog. Taking a look at the melee unit, I gotta say, I'm not a huge fan. It looks to be a little bit too big for a tier 1 unit, and the chainsaw's not really doing it for me. There looks to be a shift towards the human faction being a bit more polished, a bit more advanced and higher tech, rather than kind of your ragtag army scrapped together. But to be honest, I kind of like the human faction being sort of technologically underdogs, having to fend off seemingly superior demons, but hey, maybe that's just me. I think especially because the Infernals looking to be a bit more advanced in technology, it feels a bit awkward if the humans are doing the same. Either way, let me know what you think of the Vanguard and how it should be in the comment section below. What I am glad for though is that the Hedgehog is being looked into, as it's been the brunt of, well, kind of several memes in the past, but this Transformer looking unit seems a lot better. It looks good for showing off the deployed and undeployed version of the Hedgehog, just a question of whether it can be readable to see between the 2 versions. Now moving on to looking at the update that Stormgate actually received in terms of its gameplay, well, it focuses on improving and expanding the cooperative experience. A new Vanguard hero is being introduced, he's called Riker, and he's got his own sets of units and upgrades and gear items. Frostgiant Studios have also raised the hero level cap to 20, providing all heroes with more gear options to unlock and stat boosts to earn. So Riker, he's a master tracker. He goes by the alias Wolf, and he joins the list of playable heroes in the co-op. Now Riker is unmatched in recon and long-range support, and is the Resistance's go-to operative for delicate missions that require a stealthy approach and surgical precision. Voiced by Matt Mercer, Riker is a loner who avoids the company of other people, kinda sad, but either way, he is always accompanied by his loyal companions, the Twin Hounds, Ghost and Shadow. Now the pretty cool thing for Stormgate is that everyone can try Riker for free up to level 5. Players who don't own Riker can actually fully unlock his progression, including his unique gear from the in-game store. Now with all that said and done, the developers do point out that this is an early version of Riker that uses the original character model that they created for the campaign, and they are already in the process of creating a new Riker character model so that he will enjoy a visual glow up similar to what they did for Amara. Definitely a good decision there. With a new hero like Riker comes new hero abilities, units and upgrades. I won't go into a full deep dive into them in this video, but I did want to highlight some of the major ones specific to this new hero. When it comes to abilities, Riker has 4 basic ones. First of all, Riker is able to summon Warhounds, which are his companions Ghost and Shadow, and once summoned, they gain 75% bonus movement speed for a limited time. Tuck and Roll sees Riker be able to dodge attacks and quickly tumble to a target location. Upon getting to said location, he gains movement speed and attack speed for 5 seconds. Active Camouflage allows Riker to enter a stealth mode, and his first attack while stealth deals 300% bonus damage. Boom is Riker's final ability when he reaches level 5, which allows him to take aim, channeling and locking onto a target, then firing a massive shot at the target. Now if the target dies, the energy cost is refunded and the cooldown on the ability is set to 10 seconds. Now in terms of units, we've of course got Riker's 2 Hound companions that are great at sensing nearby enemies under the fog of war, or stealth enemies, and they are very nimble on their feet. But we've also got the Rocketeer. This unit replaces the Exo. It's a ground anti-infantry range unit that has an explosive attack and has vengeance detonation, where upon death, their weapon detonates, dealing damage to all enemy units within a small radius. This unit in particular is actually really fun to play with. I've been messing around in co-op and it's a lot of fun. Next, we've got the Outrunner, which is a harassment and infantry transport unit that's great for moving units around the map really quickly, safely, and effectively. Each infantry unit loaded into the Outrunner activates an additional weapon, but it also makes it heavier, slightly reducing the movement speed of the actual Outrunner unit. Riker also brings a new defensive structure in the form of the artillery cannon, which has an attack that deals massive damage in its center and splash damage in the area around the impact site. Alongside all of this, you even get new top bar abilities, new global passives, new gear items, and even unique upgrades. A lot seems to have improved over the last few updates, and so I'm actually still quite optimistic that Frost Giant can pull a rabbit out of the hat, which is what it seems like you gotta do these days to be able to make a successful RTS game. Considering the problems they've faced, they've come back with full transparency, they're owning the fact that there have been problems, and they're showing that, well, they're taking some really good steps in what I believe is the right direction to fix it. I'm quietly optimistic for the full release of the game, especially when we get the 3v3 game mode and the campaign improvements. The real question is whether they can undo what's been done, and whether Stormgate will become the fresh new Blizzard-style RTS game that so many of us have been wanting for a long time. Let me know of your experience of Stormgate so far, and what do you think of the changes and updates we've talked about today? If you haven't given it a try, I really highly recommend it, especially the cooperative game mode. It is free after all. Now, whilst we are all very hopeful for Stormgate, there are plenty of more RTS games on the horizon. I even go through a lot of them in another video. If that interests you, click the box on your screen right now. Take care, and see you next time.